Now is Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, who sits on the House Intelligence Committee. Greg Brower is a former U.S. attorney and former senior FBI official. Philip Bumps, a national correspondent with The Washington Post. And Kate Fang is an MSNBC legal analyst. Katie, I want to start with you, because I think you've been watching this Cohen guy for a while now. And you know, I was reading For Whom the Bell Tolls the other night, trying to catch up. And they said when they're fighting the fascists, that when you have a sad look on your face, be careful. That's the one that's about the switch. That's the one that's about the turn. It's a giveaway. And I've heard that from an actor who's been playing him lately, too. What is this? What's going on with Cohen? Can you tell?
So there's a myriad of reasons why we're hearing this furor over whether or not Cohen's going to be, replacing the lawyers that are McDermott, Will, and Emery that are currently representing him. I mean, here's the bottom line, Chris. It's expensive. I mean, these lawyers in Washington and New York are charging upwards of almost $1,000 an hour to be able to represent Michael Cohen. So it could just be something as simple as the almighty dollar, and that is the reason why Cohen is dropping these lawyers on Friday. But here's a possible wrinkle. It could be the lawyers dropping Mr. Cohen, actually. So,
well, they had a look at all. They've been looking, Katie. They've been looking at all that stuff, all those tape recordings, all that stuff, all this perhaps payoff information, all the Russian connection. This could be just too much to handle for these people.
I don't think it's from a quantitative standpoint it's too much. I think it could be from an actual ethical standpoint that it could be too much. Remember, when you hire a lawyer as a client, you make representations to that attorney. But attorneys have ethical obligations that are higher and beyond the client. And so if Michael Cohen, while his team of lawyers have been going through millions of documents and only a tiny percentage of them have deemed to be privileged, can you imagine what these lawyers have seen? So it could be an issue where the lawyers themselves cannot continue to represent Mr. Cohen because of what they've discovered. Or it could be the lawyers for Cohen have said, Michael Cohen, you need to cooperate. You should take a deal. You don't have an opportunity to really fight this. And Cohen could say, hey, you know what? I'm a fixer. I don't have to take a deal. Who knows? There could be a strategic decision in terms of a no meeting of the minds, irreconcilable differences, as we call it sometimes, when we as lawyers dump our clients. It could be a lot of reasons. We hear it's money. In fact, today, Judge Kimba Wood, in that Southern District of New York case with Michael Cohen, issued an order, sua sponte, meeting on her own. And she basically said, hey, parties, don't forget, you got to pay that special master her money when it comes due. So who knows if it's related to the money? It could be something more than that. But we do know that today, Michael Cohen was in California meeting with his lawyers in the Stormy Daniels case. So it's not just this Southern District of New York case that Michael Cohen has going on. He has defamation, Stormy Daniels, and the Mueller investigation.
Paddy or Grant, let me go to Congressman Swalwell. Is this a case where the hardball being played by Mueller is going to pay fruit? They're going to get information from Michael Cohen.
He better start talking soon, because the longer he waits, the more they question his motivations to cooperate. But Chris,
what do you mean by that? If he switches now, is it too late to be credible?
No. And there are people who've done very bad things who can still be honest about what they saw around him. Happens all the time. We prove a lot of cases
Valachi
doing that way. Yeah, it happens all the time.
Right.
But Chris, take a step back here. The president has a fixer. Innocent people don't have fixers. The last president who had a fixer, he didn't fare so well. And so I think this guy knows a lot.
Who was the last president to have a fixer?
I think it was probably Richard Nixon, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, didn't fare so well. So he's seen a lot. He knows a lot. If he starts talking, I think the president's in real trouble. From what we saw in our Intelligence Committee investigation, what little we saw about Michael Cohen, he was all too willing and eager to work with the Russians. It's just the Republicans were all too unwilling to learn more about his bank records, his travel records, and his phone logs. Bob Mueller is going to learn all about it.
Greg, I'm looking at this treasure trove. They got voice record. They got telephone. Apparently, Cohen was recording telephone conversations, probably with his client. All this stuff is now in the hands of the master, deciding how much is going to be used in this investigation.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot there. He clearly knows a lot about all things Trump, and so this will be very interesting. In terms of what exactly is going on with this change in legal team, time will tell. What will be telling, I think, most telling, is who he hires next. If he hires a high-priced, first-rate legal team, we know that he's serious about fighting this, or he's serious about cooperating and wants a team who can cooperate effectively with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District. So we'll see who he hires, and that'll tell us a lot.
You might go for Brendan Sullivan here in town. Go for the big time. Anyway, Cohen's cooperation could pose a number of possible dangers for Trump. When it comes to the payoff to Stormy Daniels, the president first denied knowing where the money came from. That is until his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, revealed it had come from him.
They funneled it through the law firm.
Funneled through the law firm, and the president repaid it.
The president paid it. Well, Cohen could also shed new light on his connections to Russia and what the president knew about those relationships. As we recently learned, Michael Cohen received a $500,000 payment from Columbus Nova, a company connected to Russian billionaire Viktor Vekselberg, who reportedly was close to, or is close to, Vladimir Putin. We also learned that Cohen's efforts to build a Trump Tower in Moscow went on far longer than he had publicly acknowledged, at least until June of 2016. And that means, of course, Trump was trying to build a hotel over in Russia, get some Russian rubles at the same time he was seeking American votes. That's complicated. And then there's that story from McClatchy last April, a couple months ago, that appeared to corroborate part of Christopher Steele's dossier. The report that the special counsel has evidence that Michael Cohen secretly made a late summer trip to Prague during the 2016 presidential campaign. NBC News has not confirmed that reporting. I've got to go to Philip on this. Philip, tie it all together. This guy is a pinata of information, from Russia to women to payoffs to God knows what, and all they got to do is crack them. And it all comes out.
You didn't even mention the fact that he worked for almost a decade for the Trump Organization, even prior to the campaign beginning. There's probably no one in Donald Trump's inner circle who knows more about Donald Trump's dealings before, during, and after the campaign than Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen has his finger in nearly every report that's out there that is potentially bad news for Donald Trump. There is a Michael Cohen angle to it. I mean, if you look just at that campaign period, we have on one end of the scale this payoff to Stormy Daniels of $130,000, where there are very likely campaign finance violations that were involved in that. We don't know Donald Trump's awareness of that. Then at the other end, you have the Steele dossier and these allegations that Michael Cohen was central to collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. Those are unproven in the public eye at this point. We don't know that that's true. But those are the two poles of information just within the campaign period that obviously Robert Mueller and federal investigators would love to know more about. And beyond, on either end of the campaign, he knows all sorts of things as well.
How do you think George Stephanopoulos and ABC got this story that he's about to switch, about to go state's evidence?
Well, I mean, based on what the story actually says, it suggests that they had someone somewhat close to Michael Cohen. It's not really clear. I mean, but there are certainly these external indicators.
Could be the President of the United States?
I mean, I wouldn't speculate on that.
Then he might have said to George or somebody, I haven't talked to him. It's just tradecraft here. George was just over with the president. Did the president tell him Michael's about to switch?
It's certainly possible, and this is, as one of the other guests said, we'll find out down the road. But
it's a big story that ABC's standing behind. Let me go to Greg again on this thing. What would you rather do if you were Michael Cohen? Would you make a deal with Mueller and hope for a reduced sentence or no prison time, or wait for your pardon from the president? Which side do you join here?
Well, expecting a pardon is a dicey proposition, to say the least. There's a bit of a track record of late of issuing pardons by this president, but that's a tough thing for a target like Cohen to anticipate and expect. He's under a lot of pressure. I mean, he's potentially, hasn't been charged with anything yet, as you mentioned at the outset, but potentially he is facing a lot of exposure, and so he has to be feeling the pressure and thinking about his future, his family's future, and hopefully listening to his lawyers going forward.
Well, you hear bank fraud, mail fraud. I mean, to a civilian like me, that sounds like serious federal crimes involved.
It's very serious, and I would submit that he's a very, very valuable witness for Bob Mueller and his team. And there's a lot there. So
Congressman, let's talk about the politics of this. In the end, it's going to come down to a report from Mueller. It's going to go to the House, your house, where you sit. How does this, when you get witnesses like Cohen, witnesses like Manafort potentially, witnesses like Flynn already, is that going to carry any water with your Republican colleagues?
Not until they pay a price. That price is coming in November, but they right now are looking at what happened to Mark Sanford last night, and they figure,
don't deviate.
We better go all in with the president right now. But they're going to pay a price.
Why do these Republicans march like they're in the North Korean army?
It's very
cultish. They smile in unison. They have the same facial expressions. Every time you see a bunch of them together, they're the same face.
It's very cultish. The president's attorney has a bingo card of crimes that he is exposed for, and none of them want to speak up and say anything. So we're not going to change their minds at this point. We have to change their seats. But I think
you're talking about the Republicans, not the North Koreans.
Well, yeah.
Both of them.
But come November, I think we change a majority, we go into the majority, change their seats, I think a lot of them are going to see that Donald Trump can't save them, and they should start collaborating.
I think it's likely you will get in charge. Anyway, meanwhile, with the North Korean summit out of the way this week, there's new pressure on the president to testify before the special counsel's prosecutors. According to Bloomberg News, Mueller is intent on quickly resolving a central issue with Trump's legal team, where the president will sit voluntarily for an interview after months of negotiations. The two sides must find common ground or gear up for an unprecedented legal fight, likely to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Let me go to that with Phil Buck. Does it look like, why would Trump ever agree to go and testify under oath if he could avoid it? Because then he'd have to say under oath what he says publicly, which no one believes.
Well, I mean, it certainly is the case that Donald Trump has presented that he is willing to speak with Mueller in the past, and I think there's probably some aspect of truth to that. Donald Trump clearly thinks that he is a very good at negotiating, that he can get in a room and sort of work his way through these things.
Well, so Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's a lot smarter.
I mean, it's absolutely true that Bill Clinton thought that he could get around it as well. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, certainly there is no one that I have seen who's offering legal advice to President Trump who recommends that this is a good idea. But that potential Supreme Court fight over a potential subpoena from the Mueller team, it's not clear that Trump's team would actually win that fight. And so that could actually protract the entire Mueller investigation while they fight this in the Supreme Court, which Mueller wouldn't want, but certainly Trump wouldn't want that either. And so it may actually...
I wouldn't put it past Trump to just say no to a subpoena and test it. Just say no and go
that's
to
fair,
his
but then
court.
he has to deal with this for month after month after month, whereas sitting down with them, he doesn't have to do that.
He's trashing every institution of government right now. He might as well go after the Supreme Court.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.